Massachusetts, Mr. Neal, and the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Brady. Each will control 20 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the bill under consideration.
Without objection.
I yield myself such time as I might consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am relieved that the Senate has sent this measure back to us after the House initially advanced the legislation a month ago. We are now considering this important legislation to suspend normal trade relations with Russia. The facts, the atrocities, and the emotions are all packaged in the American and congressional response in the coming moments. We will shortly consider this amendment to H.R. 6968, which will suspend Russian oil imports so that both measures may directly go to the President's desk. We have no time to waste and must immediately further punish Vladimir Putin. What we have witnessed in Bucha over the course of the last 72 hours alone more than justifies the positions we have taken in the past, and to be more even assertive and aggressive going into the future. Innocent people are being slaughtered on the streets of Ukraine, even as we meet. And the denial that has taken place from the Russian president is outrageous. These atrocities that are taking place in Ukraine are unthinkable. The disinformation, the misinformation that has been generated from Russia defies modern logic. But in this era, the world can see the devastation in near real time. President Zelensky is an inspiration to the world. People bombed out of residential neighborhoods, refugees streaming across the borders to safety, indiscriminate killings of civilians and of innocent children. Congress must do whatever we can to end this brutality and support the Ukrainian people. I want to thank Mr. Brady for his partnership with advancing this legislation to suspend normal trade relations with Russia and its enabler, Belarus. The legislation to ban the import of Russian energy makes enormous sense today. These actions will further isolate Putin and inflict greater pressure on the Kremlin to end its campaign of terror in Ukraine, and that's exactly what it is, a campaign of terror. We stand with NATO, committed to democracy and to peace on the European continent. This legislation, I know, will receive broad support from our colleagues, and I reserve the balance of our time.
In reserves, the gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the Senate has finally taken action. Now we can move forward on our bill to answer President Zelensky's passionate plea to the United States and all free nations to stand with the brave people of Ukraine against Putin's deadly ambitions and heartbreaking genocide. Putin's onslaught has been relentless. Beautiful town squares have been leveled, families and children killed, families abused. The bill we send to the President today will stop American dollars from funding Russia's bloodletting. Today, Mr. Speaker, we are leading, and I thank Chairman Neal for his great leadership and his work on this bipartisan provision to suspend Russia's special trade status. I was proud to have helped lead this bipartisan effort of the Ways and Means and Senate Finance Committees. Both parties in Congress came together, worked in good faith on a bipartisan bicameral agreement to immediately ban purchases of Russian energy and suspend our trading relationship with Russia and Belarus. We don't take these steps lightly, but Russia's aggression requires this approach. Russia will no longer enjoy the same special trade status with America as the country it is invading. So it will no longer be able to sell made-in-Russia products in the United States at lower tariffs. And combined with the energy import ban, which targets 60% Russia sells us, this provision targets the remaining 40%, hurting Russia's economy and cutting off funding for its war effort. Said another way, American dollars will no longer fund Russia's war machine. This is another step in the right direction, includes further incentives for Russia to end its aggression. This bill, by the way, includes tough but clear conditions to be met for restoring Russia's trade status, the same conditions as we are requiring to reverse the import ban on Russian energy products. Going forward, we must continue to work closely with our allies to increase pressure on Russia ensure this is an effective global effort. Neighboring Canada has also taken serious action to do both of these, and other nations have announced their intentions to do the same. Finally, I am glad this bill no longer includes controversial changes to the Global Magnitsky Act Sanctions Authority. Instead, this bill merely includes a straight extension of the current Global Magnitsky Authority. I'm thankful the Senate shared our concerns, removed that provision. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me recognize the gentleman from Texas for 1 minute, Mr. Doggett.
I thank you both for your bipartisan effort on this bill. 6 weeks ago today, Putin began his bloody aggression in Ukraine. The next morning, Representative Blumenauer and I introduced legislation to revoke normal trade relations with Russia and expel it from the World Trade Organization. On March 9th, this House overwhelmingly approved action on the World Trade Organization, but deferred the PNTR provision and added the important Magnitsky provisions, which the Senate has weakened today in this legislation, and a ban on Russian energy. Thereafter, on March 17th, the House approved overwhelmingly again the PNTR provisions. It's taken 6 long weeks to approve this first economic sanctions legislation, but today it is finally done. We know that it will not immediately end the funding of the Putin war machine, but it is a step in the right direction. Let us hope that the administration will move forward more expeditiously on getting the Ukrainians every weapon they need to defend themselves, that it will move more fastly than this bill did. I yield back.
The gentleman from Texas yields back. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to yield 1 minute to the Republican leader of the Trade Subcommittee, the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Smith.
Gentleman from Nebraska is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 6968. I think it's been well laid out here that we could have done this some weeks ago, March 9th, when the bill originally passed. It's regrettable that Speaker Pelosi chose to try to add some controversial provisions that actually slowed it down. It's high time that we come together in an action like this, and I'm glad to say that as the lead Republican of the Ways and Means Trade Subcommittee, I support this. I urge my colleagues to do the same, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Nebraska yields back. The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to close if Mr. Brady is prepared to close.
Well,
The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
yielding myself as much time as may consume. This bill has overwhelming support. It is time to act now. I urge passage. With that, I yield the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields the balance of his time. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The gentleman's position was well stated. I think this legislation is powerful in terms of the message it sends to the world, reinforces what we've done here over the course of the last 6 weeks. The House has been consistent on all of these measures from day one. And I would ask that there be a very strong and assertive vote today to send the message to a dictator in Russia who is killing innocent women and children in the streets of Ukraine, and at the moment, he appears to be still unrestrained. And with that, I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and concur in the Senate amendment to H.R. 7108? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Okay, in the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. Purpose is the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, on that, I request the yeas and nays.
Okay. Pursuant to Section 3S of House Resolution 8, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings are postponed. Purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and concur in Senate Amendment H.R. 6968, the Suspending Energy Imports from Russia Act.
We ask the clerk to please report the title of the bill.
H.R. 6968, an act to prohibit the importation of energy products of the Russian Federation and for other purposes. Senate amendment.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Neal, and the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Brady, each will control 20 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the bill under consideration.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
I think that what we're doing here is to certainly reassert ourselves on what the Senate has done, which the House did originally. And we strongly support the House taking swift action to concur in the Senate amendment before us so that the legislation to suspend energy imports from Russia that we passed a month ago now can move to the President's desk. We have no time to waste, as Mr. Brady and I have both indicated. We must immediately and move to further punish Vladimir Putin, a ruthless dictator hell-bent on destroying an independent nation that he purports to suggest doesn't really exist. That will come as a vast surprise to the civilized nations of the world. Congress must do what we can to end this brutality and continue to support the Ukrainian people. Again, I thank Kevin Brady for his partnership in advancing this legislation to ban the import of Russian energy, as well as our intent here to suspend normal trade relations with Russia and its enabler, Belarus. These actions will further isolate Putin and his regime and inflict greater pressure on the Kremlin to end this campaign of terror. I know our legislation will receive broad support from our colleagues, and I reserve the balance of our time.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
So, Mr. Speaker, I join with Chairman Neal urging the House to take the final legislative step to ending the flow of American dollars toward Russian oil that acts as a treasury for Russia's war machine. Soon, President Biden will have on his desk a bill that demonstrates we stand with the people of Ukraine. As Chairman Neal pointed out, Ukrainian people have been waiting. The action we take today is long overdue, but just as necessary. And since we first debated this bill, the horror of Putin's war in Ukraine has been on display for the world to see. Today, we will make sure American dollars will no longer fund Russia's war machine by blocking all Russian energy imports. The bill also strengthens the sanctions by ensuring that before the ban can be lifted, Russia must meet 3 clear criteria: withdraws its forces from Ukraine, poses no immediate military threat of aggression to NATO, and recognizes the right of the people of Ukraine to independently, freely choose their own government. This is an important bipartisan victory. There is still more we can do and should do. We should turn toward unleashing America's own ability to be energy independent, to replace Russian oil with American sources, use our energy strengths to wean the world from Russian energy. With that, I would like to yield 1 minute of my time to the Republican leader of the Trade Subcommittee, Mr. Smith.
The gentleman from Nebraska is recognized.
Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity that we can work together. The Chairman, I appreciate your comments, and certainly our ranking member. It's only appropriate that we move to use the key trade tools at our disposal to hold Vladimir Putin accountable for these atrocities that he has committed against Ukraine, because we know it is being felt around the world, in addition to what the people of Ukraine are feeling. And I'm glad that we can act in this manner. I wish we would have done it sooner, but I'm glad we can act today. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman from Nebraska yields back. The gentleman from Texas reserves.
You know, yes, I do, but I would like to indicate we are prepared to close.
Gentleman from...
Recognize the gentleman to close.
Okay, the gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we strongly support that. This is great bipartisan work from the House. Thank you, Chairman Neal and the Ways and Means Democrats in working together with us in Senate Finance. I urge a strong passage in the House, and with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Yields back. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. An acknowledgement to Mr. Brady and the Republican members of the House who have stood with Democrats in a unyielding position of support for the Ukrainian people. On this occasion, we send another message that civilized people of the world are all Ukrainians at this moment. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and concur in the Senate amendment to H.R. 6968? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative. For what purpose is the gentleman
on that,
from
I
Texas
request the yeas and nays.
seek recognition?
Thank you.
Gentlemen request the yeas and nays pursuant to Section 3S of House Resolution 8. The yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings are postponed. start with the proceedings here. Proceedings will resume on questions previously postponed. Votes will be taken in the following order. Motion to suspend the rules with respect to the following: concurring in the Senate amendment to H.R. 7108, and then concurring in the Senate amendment to H.R. 6968. The first electronic vote will be conducted as a 15-minute vote pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20. Remaining electronic votes will be conducted as 5-minute votes. So pursuant to the Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Neal, to suspend the rules and concur in the Senate amendment to H.R. 7108, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk, please, will report the title.
H.R. 7108, an act to suspend normal trade relations treatment for the Russian Federation and the Republic of Belarus and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and concur in the Senate amendment? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote. What purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Harshbarger of Tennessee, I inform the House that Ms. Harshbarger will vote yea on H.R. 7108. Thank you.
Are we no one on our side? What purpose does the gentleman from Alabama seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Brooks of Alabama, I inform the House that Mr. Brooks will vote yea on H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Tom Tiffany of Wisconsin pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. Tiffany will vote aye on concurring in Senate amendment to H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Gibbs of Ohio, I inform the House that Mr. Gibbs will vote yea on H.R. 7108.
What purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina?
Designated by Mr. Wilson of South Carolina. Mr. Wilson votes yes on 7108.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
As the member designated by Chairwoman Eddie Bernice Johnson, Chairman Scott, Chairman Meeks, Chairwoman Carolyn Maloney, and Representative Peters, I inform the House that these members will vote yea on concurring on the Senate amendment to H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Speaker Tonko, as the member designated by Mr. Gomer of the great state of Texas, I inform the House that Mr. Gomer will vote yea on H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek
Sir,
recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Representative Norman from South Carolina, I inform the House that Mr. Norman will vote yea on H.R. 7108.
Does the gentlewoman from Georgia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Blunt Rochester of Delaware, Ms. Clark of Massachusetts, and Mr. Cleaver of Missouri, I inform the House that these members will vote yes on the concurring on the Senate amendment to H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentleman from North Dakota seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the member designated by Mr. Gonzalez from Ohio, I inform the House that Mr. Gonzalez will vote yes on H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Member designated by Ms. Granger, Mr. McCall, and Mr. Crenshaw of Texas, I inform the House that Ms. Granger, Mr. McCall, and Mr. Crenshaw will vote yes on H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Joyce of Ohio, I inform the House that Mr. Joyce will vote yea on H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the member designated by Representatives Taylor, Jackson, and Sessions from Texas, I inform the House that all of these members will vote yea on H.R. 7108.
The gentleman from Ohio seek recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the member designated by Mr. Winstrup from Ohio, I inform the House that Mr. Winstrup will vote yea on H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Ryan of Ohio, Ms. Bass of California, Mr. Schiff of California, Mr. Krishnamurthy of Illinois, and Mr. Swazi of New York. I inform the House that these 5 members will vote yes on concurring on the Senate amendment to H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Representative Kilmer of Washington State, I inform the House that Representative Kilmer will vote yes on the concurring on the Senate amendment to H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Baird of Indiana, I inform the House that Mr. Baird will vote yes on H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Lawson of Florida, Mr. Bowman of New York, Mr. Doyle of Pennsylvania, and Mr. Infume of Maryland, vote yes on H.R. 7103.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Barr of Kentucky and Ms. Wagner of Missouri, they will vote yea on H.R. 7108.
Does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
As a member designated by Mr. Huffman, I inform the House that Mr. Huffman will vote yes on the concurring amendment to H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Dr. Gosar of Arizona and Mr. Cawthorn of North Carolina, I inform the House that these members will vote yes on the measure.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Cardenas, Mr. Christ, Mr. Gomez, and Mrs. Washington Schultz, I inform the House that these members will vote yea on the concurring Senate amendment to H.R. 7108.
What purpose does the gentleman from Rhode Island seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Ms. Jackson Lee of Texas, I inform the House that Ms. Jackson Lee will vote yes on concurring on the Senate amendment to H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Loudermilk of Georgia, Mr. Crawford of Arkansas, Mr. Bilirakis of Florida, Mr. Simpson of Idaho, Mr. Desjardins of Tennessee, and Mr. Long of Missouri, I inform the House that these members will vote yea on H.R. 7108. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition?
As member designated by Mr. Cahaly, I inform the House that Mr. Cahaly will vote yes on concurring on the Senate amendment to H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Price of North Carolina, I inform the House that Mr. Price will vote yes. He will vote yes on concurring on the Senate amendment to H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Mississippi seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Bishop of Georgia, I inform the House that the members will vote yes on the concurring on the Senate amendment to H.R. H108.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker,
As the member designated by Ms. Mikey Sherrill, Mr. Donald Norquist, Mr. Albio Series, Mr. Donald Payne, Ms. Lucille Royboy Allard, Ms. Ann Kirkpatrick, Ms. Bonnie Watson Coleman, and Mr. Josh Gottheimer, I inform the House that these members will vote yes on concurring on the Senate amendment to H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Stube of Florida, I inform the House that Mr. Stube will vote yes on H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as member designated by Jim Cooper, Henry Cuellar, Joaquin Castro, Josh Harder, Eric Swalwell, and Ro Khanna, I inform the House that these members vote yes on concurring on the Senate amendments to H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Utah seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as member designated by Ms. Letlow from Louisiana and Mr. Katko from New York, I inform the House that Ms. Letlow and Mr. Katko will vote yea on H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York rise?
As the member designated by Ms. Pelosi, I inform the House that Speaker Pelosi will vote yes on concurring on the Senate amendment to H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As a member designated by Mr. G.T. Thompson of Pennsylvania, I inform the House that Mr. Thompson will vote yea on H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from New York rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Owens of Utah and Mr. Jacobs of New York, I inform the House that both Mr. Owens and Mr. Jacobs will vote yea on H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Virginia rise?
As a member designated by Mr. McEachin, Ms. Porter, and Ms. Frankel, I inform the House that these members will vote yes on concurring on the Senate amendment to H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Higgins, Ms. Stanbury, Ms. Newman, and Mr. Levin, I hereby inform the House that these members will vote yes on concurring on Senate amendment to H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Florida rise?
As the member designated by Mr. Dunn of Florida pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. Dunn will vote yes on H.R. 7108. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Deutsch of Florida, I inform the House that Mr. Deutsch will vote yes on the concurring on the Senate amendment to H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Oklahoma seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mrs. Van Dyne, I inform the House that Ms. Van Dyne will vote yea on H.R. 7108. Thank you.
What purpose does the gentlewoman from Florida seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the member designated by Ms. Boebert of Colorado, I inform the House that Ms. Boebert will vote yea on H.R. 7108.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Ms. Granger, Mr. McCall, Mr. Crenshaw of Texas, I inform the House that those three members will vote yes on H.R. 7108. Okay.